In this video, you'll learn how to use a combination of both Bubble and OpenAI to create a custom SaaS app. Within this app, we're going to be building a book recommendation product. It'll start by asking your users a series of detailed questions before then recommending the perfect book to them using the Google Books API. Now for this video, you don't need any coding experience at all. We'll be sure to walk through all of these step-by-step instructions in as much detail as possible. Look, there's just so much that we need to cover, so I'm going to hand this one over to Luca, and he's going to explain everything you need to know.
Hello everyone, Luca here with Building with Bubble, and today we're going to be going over quite a cool use case for AI. We're going to be building a book recommendation system that also works with the Google Books API, which then gives people the face or the front of the book, some details, and then a link to Google Books where they can go potentially purchase. So let's get started. So as you can see here, if we refresh the page of our preview here, we're going to have this loading, and then we have our first question pop up. So as you can see, it's going to ask me a bunch of questions. I'm just going to go, I like business books, hit reply. Let's do entrepreneurship and innovation. Let's do real life case studies because we like them. Lesser well known, equally impactful figures. Hit reply. For the questions you prefer, more narrative stories, and more straightforward analytical writing. Let's do analytical. And then bang. So you can see it's given us and search within the Google Books API. Everything before that was the OpenAI API. And it's given us the hard things about hard things. And it's got the rating, a quick little summary, obviously the title, and then a link where we can go buy the ebook. So just a cool little one-page SaaS idea that we're going to be learning how to build today. So let's jump into it. Our step-by-step guide here. So we're going to be on this wheel, this loading wheel. We're going to be on the main page, the book page, which is the page that comes up when the book has been selected. Then we're going to work through our API keys and API calls, and then we're going to deal with the workflows after that. Let's jump into Bubble application here. So as you can see, it's a very, very simple application. All we have is our book group for when the book has been chosen, the main submission group for the completions API, and then we've got a loading wheel. We're flicking through these two pages. So this page and then our book page here, because we've got a lot of custom states, group A here. So we've got the GPT question, so the question that the ChatGPT is asking the user. We've got the link to the image that pops up. We've got the current chat for the GPT conversation, the details of the thing, for the book itself. And that is actually about it for the custom states. So let's jump into a whole new page and build this out. Bit of a pause there given. So now we've got a new page here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the container layout to column. So now we've got a new page here. What we're going to do is we're going to set the page to column instead of fixed. Then we're going to do the container alignment to central, so everything lines up in the middle of our page. The first thing we're going to do is add that loading icon. I just added that loading icon because it takes a second on the page load for the chat to actually start. And so before the chat started, we don't want anything being displayed without the full information or the full data propagated in there. So we're just putting the little loading icon in there to sweeten up the UI. So if you drag an icon from the visual elements, let's center it in the middle of our page. Now we can choose something for the loading. Let's have a look. This one I used earlier was called Feather. If If we go, sorry Kevin, another one. So the one I used for my previous build was in feather here, and it was the feather load. Perfect. So now I'm gonna change the width to 100 and then the height to 100 as well. We're gonna go onto the appearance tab and click make this item rotate. We're gonna uncheck make this visible on page load and check collapse when hidden. And then we're gonna go back and add a condition for it to appear once we've built out some other functionality. Perfect. So let's hide this for now. So the next thing we want to do is grab our large group that the two sort of pages are going to be housed within. So if we drag a group onto the page, we'll center it in the middle and horizontally in the center. And then I'm going to uncheck make a fixed width for the first second and make and then uncheck fit height to content. I'm going to set the max width to 50% for now, and max height to 50% as well, just so we've got a nice large box we can work with. So next thing we're going to want to do is add another group and uncheck make this fixed width and height again. So this group will be our first group, which is going to be recommendations group. Within that group, we have the GPT question, or the text is going to be displayed to the user as the user goes through their recommendations with the chatbot itself. So let's go into here. I'm just going to make it semi-bold and I'll keep it at 14. But what I am going to do is uncheck make this fixed width, and we're going to leave that there for now. The next thing we're going to do is grab a multi-line input. Again, uncheck make that fixed width, and then let's grab a button and center that nicely in the middle of our page. And then I go to the appearance tab for the button and change the label to reply. I'm going to go and add 10 pixels on the top between the button and the multi-line input, and then another 10 on top between the multi-line input and the piece of text we have. So for our group A, one thing I'm going to do now is actually add some padding. So padding just adds essentially margin to the inside of an element. So if I show you with 20 pixels, top and bottom, you can see it just gives space within that group. And so now when we go onto the appearance tab and change the roundness to 20, that a little outset shadow, you can see that it gives the elements a bit of room to breathe within the page. So I'm going to click on our recommendations group here, and now I'm going to center, go into the container alignment and center it, and then go on the horizontal alignment and then center that again. And now we're pretty much ready to go on to our book group. So for now, we're going to go to the layout of the recommendations group and click collapse when hidden and uncheck make this element visible on page load. And then now we can actually hide this so we can work on our next group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our containers, grab another group, Again, uncheck, make that fixed width. So it expands into our group A here. I'm going to rename this the book. We're going to want to be displaying an image. So let's grab that, place that in, go into layout, center it in our page. Now, I'm actually going to halve this because I don't want it to be this big. You could do this as a percentage if you're working with maybe a phone screen. Maybe it's better for it to dynamically change on a percentage basis if you don't know how big people's screens will be, if it's meant for mobile. But as I know I'm going to be using it on laptop for this tutorial, I'm just going to be halving these values because from previous experience, that works well. So 160 here and then 120 here. Perfect. Now, the next things we need is a piece of text for all of that title information. I'm going to leave that there for now, and then I'm going to add in a button. So now we've got our button. I'm going to rename it to view title. And to make this button smaller, what I'm going to do initially is change the text size to 12, but then I'm going to go down in the layout tab and change the padding to 6. You can see now that's made the button quite a bit smaller, and then I'm going to go to change the height and change that to 20. Perfect. So now this is our book group, and then I want to add a little bit of spacing to make it look a little bit better. Bit of our text here, 10 pixels on the top. Perfect. So now we've got all our groups and we've got all our elements on the page that we need. We need to actually go in and set up our database so we can start working through the workflows and the actions, or let the actual data flow between the page. So if you go into our database here, you can see we've got our chat, or the conversation that you're having with the GPT that's recommending the title name. And within the chat, we have a list of messages. All we actually need for the message itself is the JSON. So that is going to contain a full string of JSON code. So our chat has memory, so it remembers your previous responses to the previous questions. And that is the only thing we actually need to do for the database here. But let's actually go in and create these values again. So we're going to add a new type. It's going to be chat. I'm going to click create. Another new type, which is going to be messages. I'm going to click create again as well. In the chat, we're going to create a new field. The field is going to be messages again. The data type is going to be messages, and it is going to have multiple entries. We're going to click save. For messages, all we need to do is create a new field, call that JSON, and it is the basic type of text. Click create, and it is not a list with the multiple entries. So now we're ready with our database. Let's start working in some of our other elements. So if we go to our group A here, as we ask the questions, we're going to be calling the API, and then it's going to be giving us another question back to get another answer to. So we're going to need to store that previous question somewhere so we can display it on the page. To do that, we're going to use a custom state on this group A here. So if we go in, you can see if we click this I here on group A, we can add a new custom state in the element inspector. I'm going to call this question, or let's do GPT question. It's going to be type text. I'm going to click create. Now all our custom state does is kind of like cookies on a website where it stores temporary information. So you don't have to actually store the question in the Bubble database. You can just store it temporarily on the page and it doesn't clog up your Bubble application. So the other elements we're going to want to be temporarily saving for this workflow is all of the details of the book that's recommended. As the company, you could store this, but if you're thinking about kind of data and speed and just clogging up your database, you don't really want to necessarily at this point store every single title that has been recommended, as well as the image and all the text, etc., because that might take you out of a certain plan that you're on. It's just unneeded data. So we're going to store this as well on a custom state. So we're going to want to be storing everything for our book group here. So that's the image, the details, and the link itself. So if we go back onto our group A, go onto our custom states, add another custom state, call this image, type image, click create, another custom state, details, call this title details, that's text. And then we're going to want the link for the actual book on Google Books, and that is also going to be text. Perfect. So let's leave that there. So at this point, we have built the wheel, built the main chat page, and the book page, and we've also done our custom states. Perfect. So now we're going to want to get our API keys and then start setting up our API calls for both the ChatGPT and the Google Books API. So first thing you're going to want to do is go to your plugins tab, and you're going to want to download the Bubble API connector here. We've done this in previous tutorials. What we have to do is add a plugin, type in API, and you get the Bubble API connector here. As you can see, it's in quite a lot of applications because it's very, very necessary. Then you just click install. So once you've installed, you can have the opportunity to add another API. So it'll be here, and we'll click add an API. As you can see, these are all the OpenAI APIs that I've set up for previous tutorials. And these were the last two for the last two tutorials. So we've got our authorization section at the top of the API. And that is basically to sign in to your OpenAI account or authorize that you can use OpenAI's resources because you've made an account and you've done all the different bits and bobs needed. And then this itself is the call that's going to be getting the completions or the chatbot actually working itself. So let's actually go ahead and set this all up again. So what we want to do is we want to go to Google, type in OpenAI, and what will come up might be slightly different for you, but just click on an OpenAI API reference link here. Now it's going to automatically sign me in, but go ahead and create an account in this section. And at that point, you'll be able to go to the dashboard, and you'll be able to see the API key section on the left-hand side. And that's where you can create a new API key in the top right-hand corner. So we'll call this book and create that secret key, which is our kind of password to our account. So we're copying that, clicking done. Now we can go back to our Bubble application here and click add another API. Let's call it OpenAI. And OpenAI is actually private key in header authentication. I'm going to place that private key in here, but before the private key, we're going to type bearer space, and then we've placed our private key. This is just the format or the piece of code that OpenAI wants it to come in. Bit of a weird word, but there you go. That's how they do it. Another thing we need in the shared headers. So if we click this button for shared headers, is the bit that tells OpenAI what they're going to receive. So the key for that is actually content type, and the value is application/JSON. You can see that if we go to our API reference here and we go to our chat, create completions, which is the call we're going to be doing, you can see that content type application/JSON section here, as well as the authorization and bearer section, which is in our header, which is what these two H bits mean there. So now we have formatted our actual authentication to use OpenAI. We can now get along and create our call. So you can see we've got this import another call from C URL function from Bubble, which is super helpful. It's going to save us a bunch of time. So what we're going to do is go to our API reference. So before we were on docs. If we go over to API reference section, go to the chat endpoint, and then click on the create completions, which is the actual chat functionality for OpenAI. You can see we've got our example request, and it's actually already formatted in C URL, which is what Bubble wants to have. So if we copy that, go back to our Bubble application, click import another call from C URL, hit paste and import. You can see it's formatted most of the things we need formatting for us already. One thing we have done is we have done this content type application JSON section. I'm just pasting that in because I don't trust my spelling. So there you go. So we can just delete those two things on our call here. And let's call this one book chat, but you can call it anything you want. Some things we're going to want to change is our use as. We're going to use it as an action, so we can use it as our action within our workflows. And then we're going to want to dynamically change these elements in the code here. So what an API is just an application programming interface. It's a way for your application to talk with another application. The application that we're talking to is destined from this URL here. So this is kind of the destination that we're sending our request for information to, and then these are what's called the parameters, which is all the things we're asking for within that message. So the things we're going to want to change are the role of the GPT as well as the content, because on the first request we're going to do, we are going to use the system message, but then for all the other requests afterwards, we're going to use the assistant. That's because the system role key is basically used to set the behavior of the ChatGPT at the start of the chat itself. And if you keep setting it again and again as system in all your other calls after that, it will kind of start a new chat and it won't have any memory and it just messes it up basically. So for the first one, we're going to use system, but then we're going to want to change it. So we're going to want to use it as a dynamic value so we can dynamically change it. So if we go in here, do a greater than sign and then another greater than sign the other way, we can now define a role. So if we click, you can see we've got a value that we can dynamically change that role. We're going to uncheck private. We're going to want to change the content as well. So we're going to do GPT underscore content. Perfect. And then we won't change the role user because for the user there is only the role user, but we do want to change that content because that is going to be the content from the multi-line input. So user input. And we've forgotten the greater than sign there. As you can see, now we've got everything. If you want to change the model that you're using, you can obviously change it here. If you want to do GPT 4.0 mini, for example, you can change it there. You can do it as a dynamic value and change it on the fly if you want to on the front end, but we're just going to use it as the GPT 4.0 here. So the last thing we need to do on this bit is actually add in the ability to give our assistant memory or history of the previous conversation. And we need to send it every time we make a new response. So when you're responding or you're sending a new user input here, you're actually going to be sending all the previous messages in the conversation along with that, so the AI has memory. So to do that, we're going to hit space here, do another dynamic value, history. Just gonna hit space a few times to make it look nicer. And then we can paste in all of these. Sorry, Kevin. do that again. So then for each response, which is going to be in our JSON value for our messages, this is the JSON value for each message. We can paste in all of the previous ones using this history field here. So our chat has memory. So now we need to initialize the call. We need to fill all these values in. And then we can see if we've set everything up correctly. So I'm just going to put system here, GPT content. You're a nice dude. User input. Are you a nice dude? And then for the history, we can go to the OpenAI reference here. Go to the docs section. If we go into the chat completions endpoint, gives us a nice bit of code we can use as a bit of a fake history for our chatbot. So the full section of the actual chat itself is going to be from the whole system message and the content and the whole user message and the content. And at that curly bracket, that's what we want to take. Do it before the comma here as well. So let's copy that. And then go and paste that in there. And we're actually going to want to add a comma after our history dynamic value. Perfect. So let's initialize. And if it takes a while, that's usually a good sign. Perfect. And now you can see we have got our message back from the AI here, which is under the list choices, which is something to remember for some later steps. And you can see what it said, Home Assistant, blah, blah, blah. But our call is now set up so we can use it in the front end. So let's save. And that's perfect. So now we can actually, once we have got our API keys for OpenAI and we've set up our completions API, we can now get to grips with the Google Books API. So you're going to need to create another account for this API. However, this will be a very useful account because it's going to enable you to use all of the other Google APIs like Google Maps API, etc. So the website you want to go to is the Google console. So if you go to Google console here, you can see you've got the Google Cloud Console. You want to click that and create and set up an account. And you'll come to a page like this. And in the top left-hand corner, you'll have a list of all of your different projects. You're going to want to click New Project. That's you to give it a name. Project name, we'll call it Nice Books. And then I click Create. You can see it's creating the Nice Books project here. This is just for Google to basically track what you're doing and for what projects and if they agree with it, etc., etc. So now we've got our Nice Books project. We're going to click on that. And you can see we've got quick access here. So we're going to want to click on APIs and services. And then it's going to give us a massive list of APIs, but we can actually go and search in this search section once we're on our new project, the Google Books API. And then you click Enable, and that's enabling it for this specific project. Now, once we've done that, we've got our Google Book API here. We're going to want to go onto our credentials and then create new credentials and a new API key for the same reason we created the OpenAI API key. Now that is our API key here. We're going to copy that. And then we're going to go to our Bubble application here. We're going to add another API. We're going to call this Google. We're going to expand this call here. We're not going to do the same import another call from CURL because this call is actually very simple. Rename this get book. And for now, I'm just going to paste that API key into here so we have it as storage. So if we actually go back onto APIs here, we'll go back to enable APIs or the Google Books API, sorry. We click on that section. You can see we've got this documentation tab, which is here. And that is a long list of how you can use it and all the different ways you can use the actual API. But I'm going to save you a bunch of time because I did this earlier. This is actually the API call or request itself that we're going to be using. So this is the actual URL that we're going for. And then as you can see, it's got an input field here where every word is separated by a plus. And then we have .key, @key, or equals API key. And that is actually just the call itself. So everything is done in that place where you have the URL for the destination. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that call. Kevin, I'm just going to give them the URL. So I think that might just be easier. Yeah, I'm going to do that. So let's go back. We're only going to go back to this point though. So once you're on the Google Books API page again, you can see we can go through the documentation here. But to save you a bunch of time, and we'll leave this in the description, the API call itself, you can see they're all pretty much done in the actual URL field of the API call, and they're all set to get. And the actual API call URL for this particular one, where you're kind of searching Google Books and you're getting the information from the title specifically, that URL is this one here. And we'll have this in the description of the video. But as you can see, it is HTTP Google API /books volume 1 volumes Q equals, and then we've got brackets and the book name with each word separated by a plus. And then we've got the end of the brackets and key, and then your API key here. Now, to actually make the book itself a dynamic value, like how we did the dynamic values for the previous OpenAI API call, you actually put in square brackets. So for example, if I was to take out the square brackets for the man search for meaning, you can see we can't actually use it as a dynamic value anymore. It's just an always call to that book specifically. But if we add in square brackets, we can now use that as our dynamic value. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that in there. And then uncheck that as private. So just so you make sure it is this URL, which will be in the description. We're going to make the book a dynamic value by putting the square brackets, and then it is the key equals, and then it is your API key after that. And again, we're going to change this to action so we can use it within workflows. So let's hit initialize. Perfect. We've got everything back. And as you can see, we've got loads of information. So if we show the raw data here, we've got our title, subtitle, description. The last few messages are the actual image links. By link, interesting. Yes, we've got image links here. So everything we need for the actual title is in this API call, which is fantastic. So we're going to click save. And now we've set up our Google Books API. We can actually start building out our workflows. So if we go to our design tab, sorry again, let's take that pause out. So if we go to our workflows here, we're actually going to do something every time the page is loaded, which is start that conversational chat. So if we add a new event, and that event is when the page is loaded. We've got our new workflow here. So we're going to be starting that chat. So we want to create a new chat, create the first message of that chat so the AI knows what it's doing and it's ready to go and ready to start. And then we need to update our GPT question so it comes up in our first table here on the design tab in our recommendations section. We didn't actually click collapse when hidden here, but now we have got it here. So I've just seen here that we've got our group. When we actually clicked it for it to disappear, it didn't collapse. So if we go onto that group, onto the layout tab and click collapse when hidden, then we'll have it nice and cleanly getting out of the way. So every time we call the GPT, we need to display this message. So that's why we're doing this on page load. So we've already pre-done this so the user can come to the actual page, it loads, and then they've got the question automatically without them having to do any prior step before that. So let's go on workflows here. Let's initially create a new thing. That's going to be chat. And then let's create a new message. And then it's JSON. So if we again go to our plugin section, we can grab our piece of code for our first message here and use that as the template for each JSON file. So we're going to want to go from the first curly bracket after the history to the last curly bracket right before our square bracket here. Let's copy that code. Go to our workflow tab, and then we're just going to paste all that text in there. There we go. Now we need to change the dynamic values because the API is not going to recognize it. And for the first role of the GPT here, you're going to want to scroll by going left. We're going to take out, I'm going to call this system. Where did that go? Yeah, we're going to go in there and then state this as system. The GPT content. If we scroll left again, go to content, we can delete this. I'm actually going to insert some arbitrary text. If you type in AR, you can see we've got arbitrary text here. I'm doing that just because it makes it a lot simpler to work with. Now, this is a very important step because this arbitrary text input box is where you're actually going to be defining the behavior for the AI. So the piece of writing, or the prompt, I should say, that I've created for it to behave like it does, and for how we need it to be formatted for the Google Books API. So let's actually define the behavior of our chatbot. So let's say you are a helpful chatbot. Your role is to help me find my next favorite book. This should be based on my interests and other params that you think would lead to the best outcome. Ask me questions. Let's say ask me 5 questions only, and wait for my response. Be before moving on to the next question. And the last really important bit we actually need to add is we need it to actually format the last response after this like fifth question as our man's plus search plus for plus meaning. So what we're going to say is, now the man search for me is just a book I'm using. It's helpful because it's a long title, so it allows the AI to actually understand what you mean. So when you think book for me, respond in the format man's plus search plus for plus meaning if it was the man's search for meaning, for example. Only respond with the title, not the author, as well. Now, as you can see, it's quite a long prompt, and I've come to this based on trial and error, and you can obviously program it however you'd like to. This is just what works for me. It doesn't mean you have to do it this exact way, but yeah, this is just what's worked for me. You could do 5, 6, 7 questions, for example. You could even do a list of different types of interests and then plug it in dynamically into this bit here or whatever. You can get fruity with it like that, but I'm just going to use this one here. And then I'm actually going to say for the user input the exact same thing, just to reiterate that for the AI. So if we go into the user content, get some text and then paste that in. Now we have formatted our first message. Now this has actually not been the API call. This is just for the history for all the other API calls we're going to be making in response to the replies. So the next thing we need to do is make changes to a thing. That thing is going to be the chat. We're going to add a message, and that message is going to be the result of step 2. Perfect. Now let's set up our API call itself. So let's go to plugins. You can see we've got our OpenAI book chat. Now you probably only have 2 here. If this is the first time you're getting into building out API calls, I've got a bunch, as you can see. But just click book chat, and then you can see we've got our presets here from initialization. So we're going to use the role as system. We're just going to be basically recreating this message here. So we're going to leave it as system. We're going to put the GPT content as that paragraph. We're going to put the user input as that paragraph. However, the history is now going to be the result of the step 1's chat, its messages, and then we're doing each item's JSON. So that's pasting basically this piece of JSON that we've just created into our API call. Perfectly. So now, once we've done this API call, we want to set a couple of things in our custom states that were created on group A. So let's type in set. We have set the state of an element. The element is group A. We're going to want to put the GPT question in there. So that's going to be the response from this API call. So if we go to result of step 4, as you can see, it is going to be in the list of choices from our previous, when we initialized the call, it was under that. And it's the each item's message content, first item. Perfect. So now we have on page load, create the start of the chat, create the history, done our first API call, updated the GPT question so it comes up. And now what we're going to do is we're actually going to show our group. So before this is all happening, our lovely wheel is spinning and this is not actually visible. And then we're going to show group A here. So we haven't done already. Let's double check to make sure this collapses when it's hidden and it's not visible on page load, which we did not do at the start. But let's go into our workflows and now we can show an element. The element we want to show is group A. Perfect. Now it's going to be showing group A, but as you can see on page load for our recommendations group, nothing's visible, nor for our book group here, nothing is visible. So we actually want to set a condition here for when our input group is visible. So we define when the group A GPT question is not empty. So when we've made that API call, the API calls come back and populate our custom state, which is when something will come up here. This element is going to be visible. Perfect. So this is going to appear again when at the end of this workflow, and then we're going to show this group once we have our question. So now we have finished up with our custom state. Now we've set it as our GPT question. We can now run some visibility conditions off the back of this being populated. So on page load, we are calling the API and we're getting our first question back. So this thing is spinning and this thing is not visible. But when our GPT question has been populated, we want to show this group and we're going to want to show our book recommendation group within this group as well as hiding this. So that might sound a little bit confusing, but let's actually make sure we get it right. So the condition here is whenever input A's GPT question is empty, this element is visible. So that's only going to be before the actual API call, the initial API call has been triggered. And then for this group, it is completely the opposite of that. We're going to want to make sure this is unchecked to make this visible on page load because we want to conditionally view it. So let's go to conditions. And so when group A GPT question is not empty, so when the API call has been finished, this is going to be visible. Perfect. And then I'm going to show this one in the workflows. So if we do add show element, this is our group recommendations, and we're showing that there. So if we preview our application to make sure we're not going stray here, got a loading sign, and then we have looks to be our book group. So let's go back to the web application and work out what's going on. So got a book group here. If we uncheck, make it visible on page load. Oh. Perfect, and collapse when hidden. We go onto here. Need to show that group, so let's preview this again just to make sure. loading sign, our group pops up, but our recommendations group does not pop up. Interesting. So group book recommendations. So what we're going to do to fix this is just click make this element visible on page load. And then when we move to this one, we can hide it, make it invisible, and then that should work nicely. So let's refresh. Perfect. So as you can see, now we've gone through that, we have edit me here. And that's because we've not actually updated our piece of text yet. So if we go onto our piece of text, go into appearance, let's insert some dynamic data. And this is going to be group A's GPT question. So let's preview again. Perfect. Got it. Let's get started. What genre or genres do you most enjoy reading? Blah, 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 blah. Perfect. So we are ready for the next phase of workflows for book recommendations button here. So we're going to want to click our apply and add a workflow. So when this workflow runs, we're going to have type something in that multi-line input box, and then we are clicking the reply button for it to be sent to the OpenAI to get that response back. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a new message. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this create a message action from when the page is loaded to save some time. If we paste that, now we can go in and edit all the different things. So for this one, instead of the role being system, we've now set the system message, so we want it to be assistant. So type in assistant there. The message, the GPT content message, is now actually going to be our previous question we asked by the GPT. So that is going to be the group A's GPT question, and our content is going to be, if we delete this, we can just input the multi-line input A's value. Perfect. Now we're going to want to make changes to a thing. That thing is going to be our chat. Now we can't actually grab that chat from the previous message like we did in the page loaded here. So what we're going to do is actually create another custom state and then add another action to here. Now you'll find this is kind of what happens is you're kind of into building something and you've figured out that you've forgotten something, and then you can just go back and make it all work properly in the end. But it's a bit of a process. So let's go into group A here, add a new custom state. It's going to be chat in the type, data types is chat. Click create. And then when the page is loaded, once we've created our chat, we're going to want to set a custom state, group A's chat, and the value is going to be the set one. Perfect. So now when we're replying and we're trying to add this message to the chat, we can now find group A, and we can grab its chat. And then we can go onto its messages and we can add the message we've just created here. And then we can do our next API call off the back of that. So let's go to plugins again, go to our book chat. And again, we're going to change this to match our message exactly. So assistant GPT content is the current group A's GPT question. The user input is that multi-line input A. It's a value. And then the history again is going to be input A's, chat, messages, each item message JSON. So now every time we reply, we are creating history and add it into our chat, and then we are continuously adding, so the chat has memory through this history function here. So now we had a new request. Now we've sent our new request. We're getting our request back from the back of step 3, and so we're going to want to update our custom state. So let's set a new state. Element is group A, GPT question, and it's the result of step 3's choices, message content, first item. Perfect. So now we could basically do this until, or leave it as this, and it would constantly just give us new questions until we hit the point where it's giving us mans plus search plus for plus meaning, or that command we've stated in the system message in our first call here. So when that happens, we then want to call our Google Books API and populate that mans plus yada 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 into the API call, that dynamic value we have in that URL. But we only want to do that when it is mans plus yada yada yada. So let's first of all do our API call, because we're going to want to populate our book group with the image and the details and the link. So plugins, get book. You can see we've got our dynamic value here. So we're going to insert the, again, result of step 3's choices, message content, first item, because that is going to be the command that we get back from ChatGPT. But we only want to do that when, again, the response we're getting back, so the book chats, response choices, each first item message content, first item, when it contains a plus. Now, obviously, ChatGPT is just going to be asking it questions, and it's not going to be using a plus in a normal sentence. If it does, it probably would mess up this workflow, but I've tested it a million times, and it just asks, normal basic questions without doing maths randomly in the middle. So we can use the plus only if it contains plus to then use this workflow, and it works perfectly fine. So after that happens, we're going to want to set our custom state, because we're going to be pulling our data for our image and our link and our details from that custom state. So let's set a state. The state of that element is going to be group A. It's going to be the title details. It's also going to be the image, and it's also going to be the link. So for the value, so the text that we're going to be populating, again, I'm just going to put arbitrary text to make it simpler. We're going to set that text to be get a book. It's within the items list. And you can see we've got all these different things we can get. So let's get the title, first item here. And after this, if we actually do a couple spaces, we can then add some lines in. So let's copy this expression. On the last line, let's insert some another dynamic data. If we click paste, we can then just click the info title section and jump straight back in without having to reformat and redo the whole series of things. So let's do description. Then we can click off. And then let's go in again, insert some dynamic data, paste, click the title section. Then we can find, let's do the author. And you can obviously populate this with all the information that you want. I'm just gonna, do that. Paste again, and then the last thing, let's find the rating. So you can see we've got info rating count, we've got average rating. Let's grab average rating. And it, for some reason, has a list of the ratings. So if we actually just do average, then that will create it into one number. Format has a number with one decimal place, so it's not just 0.0001115 blah blah blah. So we've formatted our details section here, but let's actually now go into the rich text editor section. We can make it look nice, because this is going to be how it's going to be coming out in that text section. So each item's volume info, description, first item. So this is the next one. And again, the result of, I want the title to be not that big, but pretty big. And bold. Then I'm pretty okay with everything else, I'd say. So let's do that there. Now the image is gonna be, again, the get book API call, items. And then if we type in image, you can see we've got this image links small, and then this image links thumb. I'm just gonna go with image links small. Let's go thumbnail. Perfect. And now we've got our link. So let's go to the getbook Google API call again. Items. Type in link. And then we've got our info link. And I believe, okay. So once we've got our list of links here, we can actually pick one. Now I've tested all the links. I've gone through and put them in my browser and seen what comes out. The link we want is actually this canonical role link here. So if we grab that first item, we can leave that in there. So now we've updated this custom state, our book group here now has data it can pull from. So I'm just going to hide the recommendations group so we can work a bit easier. But we actually haven't programmed where it's going to be pulling all these things from. So if we can get that out, that would be good. So what we're going to do is add a link in, dynamic link, insert some data. It's going to be group A's image. This piece of text here is going to be group A's title details. And this, we're going to add a workflow. When we click this button, we want to do some navigation. So if we type in NA, we can navigate to an external website. Destination, it's going to be that link from group A's link. And let's click open a new tab to the external website. So now that is an option. I'll go back to our workflows here, and we actually only obviously want this to run when our condition is met for the title being given to us by ChatGPT. So we're going to paste this condition into here. And one thing we've forgotten is actually resetting our inputs, because every time we click this button and we're not doing these two actions, we want to ask another question, we get another question, and we want to type something different in. So let's add reset relevant inputs. And that is just to do that every single time. So now we can actually set a condition for our book group to appear when we get that data. So on our recommendations screen, we're going to add a condition. And that condition is when group A's, and we could choose image, link, or details. I'm just going to choose the link. When that is not empty, so when that's been populated by the Google API workflow initiating because we've been given the title detail from ChatGPT. When that happens, then this is visible. We're going to uncheck that. Then we're going to copy this condition, go to our book here, paste it in, and then check make this element visible. So when group A's link is not empty, so when it's been populated, this element is visible. So let's preview application to make sure it is working completely fine. We've got our loading screen, lovely. What genre of book do you enjoy the most? Fiction. Great. Then it's for topics or themes. Let's do science. Do you prefer books that are more technical, detailed, or ones that are more accessibly written? Let's do more accessibly written. Do you prefer more recent publications or older ones? Both. Coming up to our last question now. Are there any other specific interests or hobbies you have that might influence your reading choice, technology, nature, blah, blah, blah? Biotech. Perfect. The Immoral Life of Henrietta Locke. So, as you can see, some formatting needs to be done here. We can literally fix this by going to our group here. And now it's only 50%. Now we've worked in it really nicely. We can take away the 50% here, make it fit to width and fit to height. Not make it fit to height, sorry. So if we're here, we can make that fit to height, and then we can also make our larger group fit to height after that. And with the width, I'm just gonna automatically make it maximum 50%. Perfect. And edit it into the last bit. Now once we've gone into our recommendations group and make it fit height, and then gone into our group A and also made it fit height, let's go into our book group and also make that fit height. So now it all fits nicely within our shadowed rectangle here. Let's preview our application again. Perfect. As you can see, with fiddling around with the make this fit height checkbox, we have now got this to very nicely set up within the page itself. And if we click on the link, we get sent to the page of the book that we've just looked for. So everything is working absolutely perfectly, and this is the end of the tutorial. Yeah, we will have the links to all the documentation and the pages you need to go to, as well as that API call for Google. But definitely let us know in the comments and how this tutorial has helped you, as well as other ideas for tutorials in the future using AI. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully this wasn't too complicated and you learned something along the way. Cheers.
And just like that, you now have a custom book recommendation app using both OpenAI and Bubble. As you can see, it's never been easier to create your own custom app without having to write a single line of code. If you found this video useful and you wanted to stay up to date with any additional Bubble resources we share, I'd always recommend hitting that subscribe button on my channel, so that way you can be the first to know whenever we drop a new video. For now though, I just wanted to say a massive thank you for taking the time to watch this specific video, and I wish you all of the best on your own no-code journey.